Servus and hello, Matthias Eichler here, and this is Singletrack. Over the last 2 weeks, I experienced trail racing from a bit of a different angle, and I liked it. I paced for the first time a friend of the show, Michael Linscott, who ran Lumberjack 100 Mile in Port Gamble, and I joined him for the last 2 loops. Each loop of the race is about 13 plus miles, and by the time I connected with him at about 5 in the mornings, he was already pretty beat up, but he held it together, and we essentially walked the last 2 loops, which totally played to my strength. Anyway, kudos to Michael for completing his 10th 100-miler. The pacing experience was super fun for me, and I was initially somewhat nervous. I had never done this before. I really enjoyed the time on the trails and trying to keep Michael's spirit high, with lots of light conversation and making sure fluids and nutrition stayed down. Michael also made it very easy for me, and he never had a complete melt and breakdown. He just kept talking about buying e-bikes and switching hobbies for good. Then, this last weekend, I helped a friend of the show, James Warner, from Rain Shadow Running at the Miller-Sylvania Trail Races just outside Olympia. This race is a fundraiser for Interfaith Works Emergency Overnight Shelter, which provides critical support for the folks of Olympia and Thurston County facing homelessness. My main task was timekeeping and finish line cheering. That was super fun, and it started to feel like races are really starting to come back to normal. The community spirit was high, and people enjoyed the time on the trails, which brings me to Rock Candy's 2 summer races you should be signing up for and coming to the Pacific Northwest to race. The Beast of Big Creek is happening in just over a month on July 23rd. This classic race out of Hoodsport and running up and down Mount Eleanor is one of the most beautiful courses around the area and will be an incredible adventure for anyone looking for a great mountain race. And the summit race is now a UTMB index race. This means you can get points to qualify for UTMB races when completing Beast of Big Creek. How freaking cool is that? Then 2 weeks later on August 6th, we'll gather at Olympia's LBA Park for the Little Backyard Adventure 6-hour race. Same, slightly expanded trails through the amazing LBA woods, but now in a 6-hour format. Come out and race 1 loop, 3 or 5, or go for glory and crush the full 6 hours. You can get a 50K done out there. So visit rockcandyrunning.com for all the details and come race with us this summer. Alright, now this week I'm connecting with Andrea Löw, historian by day and Bavarian by choice, and currently working in Washington, D.C. as a research scholar at the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum. Her intense job with a very important subject makes her long for balance on the trails. During long runs all over the world, she finds time to recalibrate herself and recharge her batteries. We talk about her run at Canyons a couple months ago and chat about wild multi-day adventure trips through Africa. She's the author of Happy Running, which is currently only available in German, but in her book she's discussing her motivation and inspiration on why she runs and what keeps her coming back to running really long distances and why other people should run as well. All right, let's get to it. Here's Andrea. Andrea, thank you so much for being on Singletrack. Say hi to our listeners.
Hello, everybody, and thank you, Matthias, so much for having me. I'm really happy to be here.
Fantastic. So, Andrea, you are another German on the show. Welcome. But you're also another person from Munich. And I need to ask you this question. Why are there so many active people in Munich? Can you explain that? Why are there so many runners in Munich?
Well, I mean, Munich is so close to the mountains. Munich is surrounded by wonderful, great nature trails. So we just have to go out there and can go for a run. So I think this is quite simple answer to your question. Like for me, it was the same. I never did trail running. I was never out on a single track before I moved to Munich. Before I lived in Berlin for 3 years and ran a marathon and everything, but all just on streets. And then I moved to Munich and met all those other people telling me, oh, we can go to the mountains and go for a run there. So I think it's the surroundings.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think Munich sometimes feels far away from the mountains because it's not Innsbruck, right? It's not fully in the mountains. Munich itself is actually very flat.
It is, and that makes it really, really difficult to really train for a mountain race. I mean, I
Hmm.
run at the Isar River, and I have a tiny little bit of running up and down there, but it's really not enough for training for a mountain race.
There's only so much Olympia Hill you can
Yeah,
run up and down, right?
I've been running this up and down like 20 times in a row, and it's really not fun.
For our listeners, one of the fascinating things is that the Olympia Hill, which is a grassy hill in Olympia Park, is actually completely artificial and was put there from the subway tunnels that were dug for the 1972 Summer Olympics in Munich, and they didn't know where to put all the dirt, and so they made a giant hill, and
And so we have a mountain.
and now you have a mountain. Exactly. I sat on that hill in my early 20s, late teens, and watched Michael Jackson play in the Olympiastadion.
Oh, wow.
Anyway, about you. You were actually not calling in from Munich right now. You're calling from the East Coast. You're in Washington, D.C.?
Yeah, that's right. I'm in Washington, D.C. for 9 months as a research scholar at the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum. So something totally different than my
Something
running
very
history.
different, and that's what your profession is. You're a historian as your day job.
Yes, exactly. So I'm an historian, and so running is really just something I do like in the evenings or at the weekend. So I'm by no means a professional runner.
You are not a professional runner, which I love, but you have a very active website and you've published a book. Tell our listeners about your book, Happy Running. And it is called Happy Running, but it's only available in German right now.
Yeah, unfortunately, I didn't really approach the publishing house about having a translation. I should maybe do this because I met so many runners from all over the world who are obviously not German speaking, and so I maybe should have it translated. But until now, yeah, it's unfortunately just available in German.
So give our listeners a quick snapshot of what is Happy Running all about.
It is about, well, me and my life as a runner, as a historian, and how it's all connected. And it's a lot about traveling. Because for me, running is not about doing races so much, but it's about the adventure. So whenever I'm able to do so, I connect traveling, which I really, really love, with running, which I also really love. So I'm doing these kind of races somewhere in the world where I can run through, I don't know, deserts or little villages in Africa. And after a while, after I did many of these kind of races, I thought that I would really like to tell people about these adventures and then take them with me to all these places. So that's what the book is about. And it's really also about, it's not just a running book. It's also about me and my life and how running is connected to everything what I'm doing. Like I always think that my whole life is like an ultra marathon, and you can compare your professional life to running an ultra marathon. Like when I did my PhD, it really felt like an ultra marathon. There were phases when I felt really, really badly about it, and I didn't know how to carry on. And isn't this what an ultra marathon is about all the time? And so, yeah, it's about my life and running and traveling.
And in some respect, there is an interesting comparison between being able to take the learnings and findings from running and the problem solving and how to get into the right mindset while we are running and applying that to our life when things get hard, like you're saying, when you're studying for your PhD. And equally the other way around, I think people who are really good in that kind of high pressure problem solving in real life can probably take that and be fairly successful in ultra running.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's really, really closely connected. How you can, yeah, learn from both situations for the other situation. That's what I
Yeah.
keep telling people. I mean, whenever I face problems in my like professional life, and whenever I think, oh, this is all too much and too overwhelming, and what should I do? Sometimes I just sit there and think about one of these really, really difficult races, and then then I'm telling myself like, oh, remember how you were running in the Australian outback, and it was in the middle of the night, and you felt so badly, and you thought you cannot do another step, and then somehow you finish that race, and this really, really gives me the power and energy for my, well, let's call it normal life.
I mean, it is really true that because I think one of the big challenges that we all have to overcome is the feeling that we can't do certain things, and we are actually a lot more powerful than we think we are. And in running, we sort of have a reasonably safe environment, or very little consequences. I mean, the worst thing that could happen is a DNF, or perhaps an injury. But in general, running is a fairly safe practice to sort of practice how to believe in ourselves, right? And we can take that then to real places where things matter.
That is so true. That is really so true. We can just test it out. And as you said, the worst thing is a DNF, or well, if something worse happens, you can injure yourself. But um, it is a really safe way of trying what you're capable of doing. And I mean, this is the really fascinating thing for me about running, to really find out what you are able to do. And I mean, I had so many races where, I mean, I was standing at the starting line and I had no idea whether I would be able to finish this race. It was far beyond anything I would have thought some years ago. But then I kept telling myself, well, if you don't try, you won't find out. And as you just said, it's a very easy way and not dangerous way of finding out what you are capable of doing. Yeah.
Well, we're already deep into the weeds here. Let's pull back a little bit. How did you get into running? You're from Germany. Shouldn't you be playing soccer? I mean, I thought Germans only played soccer.
No, but I played basketball when I was younger. So I'm not from the US, but from Germany. But I played basketball when I was young. And back then, I really hated running. We had we had to go to the local forest and run before the season started, and I really, really hated it. Um, and then I didn't do any sports at all for quite a while. And then I only started running when I was 30 years old. A doctor told me that I need a hip operation. Um, and I thought, wow, I'm 30 years old and I'm supposed to have a hip operation. And I went to another doctor. Well, actually, my cousin, who was a physiotherapist, he took me to this other doctor and he said, well, you don't need an operation right now. You need more muscles. So he told me to really start doing some sports again. And then I started running. And it was really, I mean, this is 18 years ago now. And I mean, I have to admit that at the moment my hips start hurting a bit again. So it might be that I will need this operation at some point. But I mean, I already had these last 18 years without any problems. And instead of having a hip operation, I did these multi-stage races, these 100-kilometer races, and all kind of things that the doctors would never have me expected to be to be able to do. So yeah, that was how I started running. And back then, I did some, I don't know, 5, 6K. I never thought about even running a marathon, not to talk about ultra marathons.
Is it for you getting into these long distances? Was it sort of a gradual step, or so you're running for fitness, and then you sign up for 5K and then a 10K and then a marathon? Is it sort of a gradual progression? How did you find out that somebody could run 100 kilometers through the desert? Like, how do you find out about this, and how do you decide for yourself, you know what, perhaps this is something I should do?
It was just as you said. It was a kind of process. It was a gradual development. My first race was this kind of 6 or 7K race. Back then, I started in a team for the University of Gießen, where I used to work back then, and they asked me whether I want to do this race in Frankfurt. And so I did this. I think it was 6.8 kilometers. It was really a short race, but I found it so amazing. I felt like in New York, like in downtown Frankfurt, and all those people were cheering at us, and I was absolutely flashed, and I thought, oh, I have to do more of this. So I started signing up for races, and then on a New Year's Eve, I agreed to do a half marathon. And I think it was 2 years later, after I moved to Berlin, that I thought, oh, I would really like to run the Berlin Marathon. So it was always some 2 or 3 years in between, and then I doubled the distance in a way. Um, and then when I moved to Munich, and as I said in the beginning, when I met all these other crazy trail runners, they were all out of a sudden talking about this. Oh, I did this 50K race in the mountains, and I was like, wow, how could anybody do this? And it took me, I think, a year or so that I signed up for my first 50K race, which was it was really, really hard. It was in the Black Forest, and it was raining so badly the whole day. I didn't see anything. I kept telling myself that probably it's really beautiful out here, but I didn't see a thing. And it was freezingly cold. So at the aid stations, I couldn't really stand and eat anything. So it was, in a way, it was terrible. But then at the same time, it was so great. And I finished the race, and I was the happiest person in the world. And so very shortly after this, I signed up for the next race. And so, I don't know, in a way, the distances became longer, not because I told myself, oh, now I have to run 80K or so. It was just, I was always curious, and I read about some races, and I thought, oh, this sounds really fascinating. And then you ask why I decided to run 100K in the desert. Um, a running friend, posted on Facebook that he did all those multi-stage races in the desert, and now he founded this running club where he wants to take us rookies to the desert. So if anybody wants to come with him, he will, I don't know, give us advices and tell us something about the things we have to take with us. And the race will be in Namibia, and it's going to be 250 kilometers in 7 days. And I thought, oh my God, this is a dream coming true. And so I signed up for this race, and that was in 2017 maybe, or 16. And this was my first multi-stage race with like the backpack was everything I needed for 7 days, like food for 7 days and a sleeping bag and everything. And it was the hardest thing I ever did. Sometimes I found myself standing in the middle of the desert, crying, shouting. But at the same time, it was really like the most intense thing I ever did. And it was so wonderful and so great to be out there and without Wi-Fi, without anything, which is all the things that are important in your normal life were just gone and not important at all. So and since then I really got into these multi-stage races. I really liked it. So it was some kind of process. I didn't start running and thought, oh, now I want to do these long races. I never thought that.
I mean, in some respects, that sounds like a good German who goes on vacation in the mountains, right? There's sort of these two things. You either go to the beach and you don't want to do anything other than drink some colorful drinks and and for 2 weeks just get
I like
roasted
that
on a
as
beach.
well, I have to
You
say.
you like that as well, but there is sort of this idea that your vacation is adventure, right? And vacation is something that where you do where you do, because for a lot of people the idea of vacation is I don't want to have to do anything, right? I don't want to have discomfort. I just want to sit on my ass and relax, right? But you do these races, you travel all over the world, you do these races, and they're really hard. There's a lot of discomfort in there, but that's what is vacation for you, right?
Yeah, I mean, as I said, I can really deal with a week in a really wonderful hotel on the beach and drink colorful drinks. I mean, I can really deal with that as well. But these kind of adventurous vacations mean so much more for me, because this is when I mean, it's all like, as I said in the beginning, I'm a Holocaust researcher, so I'm doing history. I deal with this topic every day. which is not always easy. And when I do these kind of adventure races, I don't think about my work at all. It's really, this is a real vacation for my mind. And so my body really suffers during these vacations sometimes. Like my feet are not in a very good they don't look nicely after 7 days in the desert. I can tell you that much. I'm not going to be a food model. So it's hard for my body, but it's so wonderful for my mind, and it's really vacation for me.
It's like almost therapy then, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
it really is, because I really don't think about anything which is important in my life like normally. It's really, I'm just out there, and I absolutely live in the moment when I'm out there. It's all about, okay, what's going to happen for the next 10K? Do I have enough water? Do I have to eat something? Are there any animals around me? Oh, there's a village. So let's see whether there are any children. So it's all, yes, I so live in the moment during these races. And this is, I mean, like in my normal life, I find it so hard to concentrate with social media. Like I'm on Twitter, I'm on Facebook, I'm everywhere. I write this blog and I write books for I write professional history books. And so there are so many things going on. And there's a conference here and a lecture there. And I'm teaching at a German university. And like my head is so full. And then I go out there and run through nature, and it's just about the moment. And I really concentrate about the moment then, and on the moment then, and that is really, really great.
yeah, it is. It's sort of a forced simplicity, but simplicity in a way that it's so intense at the same time, right?
Yeah,
That
exactly.
that you are challenging your mind to deal with the here and now, and that gives you that break of not have to worry about everyday life stuff.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. It's really, I mean, it is a really simplistic life. I mean, you even have to, I mean, you have to carry your own toilet paper, like, and you don't take a shower for 7 days. So it's really simplistic. But yeah, you absolutely have a break from everything.
Now, this is a fascinating thing because sometimes we feel like I feel like I've got kids at home and running is a hobby and running is in some respect a luxury. I mean, it is a very accessible sport. The gear is relatively inexpensive, but the time it takes in order to prepare ourselves and to go out running and stuff, it does feel like a luxury, but it is something that is required, that we need to do in order to sort of balance ourselves out again.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, sometimes I don't like during the week. Sometimes I don't go out there as much as I would like to, and I don't feel well after a week like that. I really have to say that that I mean, it starts from like my back hurts and everything hurts if I don't do any sports. But also, I really need this break of being out there.
So, um, take us a little bit to your everyday life. So, you train because you have these races on your horizon. So, do you wait for races to pop up? Do you research them? How far advanced do you plan out your next few months, and how do you train them up for that?
First of all, I have to say that for years now, I never trained enough for the kind of races I'm doing. So I have to admit that. Like for this first race in Namibia, I really, really, really trained seriously. I was so, I don't know, afraid before I started running in the desert. So that was really the only time that I trained in a way that I should train for these kind of races. And since then, I mean, I really have a busy life, I have to say. So I don't train as much as I should do. So even if I sign up for a race very, very early and I have all these great ideas about how I'm going to prepare for it, it doesn't really happen. um, so, for example, tomorrow I'm going to run a 50 miler. It's going to be a night, a 50 miler in the night, and I just signed up last week because I thought, oh, that sounds funny, that sounds interesting. Let's do it. And I have no idea what's going to happen with me tomorrow night, because my last really long run was a 50K race in California, and that was end of April. It was in Auburn because I wanted to run at least parts of the Western States race, and that's what I did
Yeah, you
during
ran
this
the
race.
Canyons endurance run, the
Yeah,
50K, right?
and
Yeah.
it was such a wonderful race, and I just loved it. And um, I felt pretty well for not having trained that well. Um, so I got the impression that my body somehow got used to this kind of, oh, sometimes all of a sudden she's doing this kind of things, so I have to cope. I don't know. So I mean, sometimes I plan these races far ahead. For example, already I think in January when I came to the US, I signed up to a 50 miler, which is going to be at the Lake Tahoe mid-July. So that was very well planned in advance. And yeah, but this race I'm doing, hopefully doing tomorrow night, I just signed up last week, so it's totally different. But normally I plan way ahead, and I really like planning these kind of races. So I really do research on the internet, and I see what kind of races are there. Like when I'm traveling, I always try to find out whether there's a marathon or anything in the city where my conference is. And sometimes this worked out pretty well in the last years. So I had a conference in Krakow and found out, oh, the marathon is one day before my conference starts. So I had these kind of things relatively often. I could also connect a research trip to the US with the New York Marathon. So I'm relatively good in planning these kind of adventures, but that doesn't really mean that I'm as good in training for them. I have to say.
So, do you follow a specific training plan, or do you just go out during the week and try to get the miles in order to stay on your feet and active?
Um, I wrote myself a training plan for this race in Namibia back then, and I really stick to this training plan, and I was very serious about that. And I tried to do this several times after that, and it somehow never worked out. And I'm really too much of a, I don't know, fun runner. I mean, that my book is called Happy Running, and my running blog is called Running Happy. I really want to. I want running to make me happy, and for example, I never do any I don't know. I never do any serious tempo training or anything. I don't do track stuff. It's I might be a much better runner if I would do all this kind of things, and I know about it. I really learned about this, so theoretically, I could write myself a training plan now. Um, I'm trying to be reasonable with my long runs, and I put those in my calendar. So, but that probably doesn't count as having a training plan.
No, no, you sound so apologetic, but I don't think you should be, because I think you speak for almost all of us, right? I mean, I know that I've, the past few weeks, have talked to some professional runners who partially or even full time get paid to run, and well, they don't have anything else to do, so for them it's easy to, well, I mean, they're supposed to follow a training plan, right? They're supposed to be strict about this. But for you, it is clearly just therapy. It's really just adventure and sort of kind of giving your brain a vacation. And I think that's what reflects and represents most of the runners that are out there. There are very few who can really chase these goals of standing on a podium, right? That there are hundreds and thousands of people who have just as much fun, but they're somewhere in the back of the pack, and they're running and they're getting everything out of it that they want to, and they're not beating themselves up, right? I mean, I think that's the other thing. You need to learn to be realistic. If you go in and you think, well, I'm going to win this thing, and you don't really do anything for it, and then you definitely won't, right?
And then you also won't have fun. I mean, you really have to be realistic. For me, it was really hard in the beginning to accept I'm really slow when it comes to climbing uphill. I really, I mean, like in a race, when it's uphill, everybody is faster than I'm better in downhill. So I really had to learn to accept that I cannot do anything now. They will just pass me, and that's okay. Because if it's a race where the finish line is somewhere where I have a downhill before that, I will at least catch some of them again. And if not, it's okay as well. So it really takes away some of the pressure if you are realistic. And I think that's important for us, like I don't know, normal runners who have a job, who have a life, who also have a social life. I mean, other than professional runners who can really, really concentrate on their running. We have a job, a full-time job, some other obligations. I mean, you have 2 kids. So, I mean, we really need to be realistic. I totally agree. Otherwise, it's going to be so frustrating, and that's not what we want to have.
Yeah. So do you find yourself so far in the back of the pack that you're worried about making cutoff? Are you afraid of the not being allowed to continue at an aid station?
I had this problem, I think, only at the Transalpine Run, which is also the only race which I tried twice, and these were my only 2 DNFs. And this also, I had to get out of the race after the 5th stage twice because I had some problems with my legs. It was really everything hurt. It was really bad. I don't even know the English word for what I had, but I couldn't move anymore. It was really, and this is also, these 2 Transalpine runs were the only races where I don't have any positive memories because I've had such a lot of pressure because of this cutoffs. And then this is a team race. So you start together with a, I'm not explaining this to you, you know that, but maybe not all your
No,
American
no, it's
listeners.
good. It's good if you explain it.
So you have to stay together with your partner. At the checkpoints, you have to be there with your partner. And it happened twice to me that my respective partner was so much better in the uphills. So I felt such a lot of pressure. And this is really not a good thing for a stage race. I mean, you can do this like if you have a 1-day 80K race, okay, fine, you're done after it. So it doesn't really matter if you're totally, totally, I don't know, stressed out. But if it's a multi-stage race and you have to go out there 7 days in a row, and you are already after the first or second day, you have the impression that, oh, I'm not sure whether I can do this again tomorrow. That is really not good. So these were the 2 occasions where I really had to struggle with the cutoff times, but only if it was uphill. um, and I also really had to struggle with, trying to be as fast as my partner and not disappointing him or her. And so I really find out that for these multi-stage races, for me, it's really easier if I'm on my own. And because then I can accept that I'm slower at some points, but then I'm faster again if it's downhill, or I don't know, just whenever I feel good, I can run faster. But if I don't feel good, I want to walk for a while. And this is something I really need to listen to myself when I want to do these long distances.
Yeah. I think that's important, right? Because, well, if you listen to the media, there is a certain path that we as runners should do. And I don't know if every single one of us needs to achieve or work towards running 100 miles.
No,
Right,
not at all.
right. I think, well, it's, and I'm not saying necessarily that it is a bad thing, but we do have to put ourselves in check and think, why are we doing this, and are we still happy? Are we still enjoying ourselves? And if we don't, how can we be okay with running a different distance, finding a different adventure that works for us, and run that, right, and experience that.
Absolutely. And I think, I mean, these ultra runs, I mean, you really, really have to want to do this. And because you feel like doing this. I mean, this is something, my husband, he also runs, but he doesn't run longer than a marathon. And I never, ever try to persuade him because he's just not into that and he doesn't want to train for it and he doesn't think it's important. And I would never, ever try to persuade him or anybody to go for these longer distances. This is really something, because it's really hard to be out there. And no ultra runner can tell me that it's always just fun. I mean, it isn't. And so when you're out there and it's really, really, really hard, and you start asking yourself, okay, why am I doing this? I could just stop. Then you really need to be convinced that you want to be there and you had a reason to come there, and you are so happy, even if it hurts now. But all in all, you are happy that you have the possibility to do this now. So it really has to be something you want to do. If you don't have this, then please don't go for these long distances.
Yeah, yeah. Find an adventure that works for you.
Yeah, exactly.
One common question that I ask folks is that, and that's sort of a common thread here on this show, is that I think our sport has two sides to it. One is I train and I run races, and the races are my adventures. And the other side is I train and I create my own adventures. I find routes through the mountains. I might try an FKT route, or I find special runs that perhaps no one has done before. Or even if I don't aim to be the fastest, I'm trying to connect these 3 peaks or something. Is that something that you've looked at, you've done? How do you feel about these special projects that are not races, where you're not wearing a bib, where you sort of have to create your own journey?
I have to admit that I find it easier to do these races, because then at least something like, I don't know, I have a tent and I know where I'm going to sleep tonight is organized already. So this is something that I really, really like. Other than that, I'm just doing this kind of, I don't know, or I want to do a long run on my own. So maybe I run this 50K around the lake Starnberg, which is not very like original. I mean, it's like, there's a lake and you can go around it. So it's not this kind of like adventure or anything I invented, but it's fun as well. So, or I try to find a really, really nice trail in the mountains. But if it comes to these like real adventures and multi-day adventures, I most of the time look for these organized things. Maybe at the end I'm just too lazy to try to organize it myself. I don't know. I mean, during COVID and when there weren't any races, what I once did was, together with another runner who is organizing these kind of things, we went out in one of those smaller mountain areas in Germany and had everything with us and slept outside and just went hiking for several days. So this is something I also really like, but I'm not really doing this kind of adventures on my own. Maybe I should start that, but until now, I think I was too lazy.
I don't know. I don't know if it's lazy, because I don't think one is better than the other, right? I mean, I think the beauty of the races is that you get to experience places that you otherwise wouldn't be able to, right? Especially if you're traveling to different countries where you don't know the environment and stuff. And
yeah, exactly.
I think the people who like adventures also very much enjoy having a map in front of them and planning things out, and to sort of the adventure starts months ahead before they even put their shoes on, when they're actually planning it out and envisioning it, right? And I think it takes a certain person who enjoys this type of planning to do this, and I don't think there is one is better than the other. I just find it interesting that our sport sort of holds both activities, and I think the races are so great because they allow us to somewhat be lazy, pay some money and have people put a route out for us and have aid stations and stuff. And there's something great because that makes it accessible, right? You're very busy and you can just sign up and show up and you know that you're taken care of.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to planning, I have to say that for these multi-stage races, there was still a lot of planning involved. I mean, as I said, you carry everything you need for these 7 days, or in Australia, I did a race which was 10 days. You carry everything with you in your backpack. So it's a lot of planning involved, figuring out, okay, what am I going to eat for 10 days? Food for 10 days, which fits into my backpack and is not too heavy. And which kind of sleeping bag do I need? And so this doesn't sound much, but it is a lot of planning and a lot of also trying your equipment beforehand and a lot of training with a really heavy backpack. And so there's still a lot of planning involved. But it's really the point, what you just said, these kind of races make places accessible for me that wouldn't be accessible for me, especially like as a woman going there on my own at all. Like I did this race in Mozambique. We were running through these villages where all the kids came out when we were running through the village. And these kids clearly never ever saw a white woman before. And so these were regions of the country where I would never ever have dared to run through on my own. So yeah, these kind of races, and it's not a huge race with like 1,000 participants. Like in Mozambique, I think we were 17 runners. So these are really, really small races. Also, the race in Australia I did there, okay, there we were 30, I think. But these are really not these kind of like huge events. So it still feels a
Yeah.
bit like an adventure,
It's
like, yeah.
it's funny, right? You almost shouldn't call it a race then, right?
Yeah,
Because
it's
you're not
really
really
the
trying to
adventure.
come in first either, right? It's
No,
about the adventure and the journey
it's
and
so
not
about the
about the
journey, but also
competition.
about the people. If you're out there with this tiny little group for 7 or 8 days, and it's really tough out there sometimes, and you don't have a shower, and you have some moments where you really feel very, very vulnerable and weak, and I mean, you make some really close friends out there if you do these kind of races together. And of course, at the end of the day, you're very, very happy if you finished a bit faster than somebody else. But this is really not the point.
Yeah. Well,
It's
and
about
these
the adventure.
Yeah, and these races are also hard to compare, right? I mean, in general, with trail running, a 50K is not like another 50K, right? And the elevation and the vertical, and there's so many variables, right? That it's very hard to compare, which then in the end, unless you're truly a professional, it is about your personal journey, and the only yardstick is how happy did I feel, how well did I feel, right? Did I problem solve well during the race, right?
Hmm. Yeah, exactly. And then as you just said, it's all about you, because like you cannot compare the pace or anything. I mean, if you are doing a mountain marathon, you're not, well, at least I am not going to finish in less than 4 hours, and so it's not
I
about the
probably
pace.
wouldn't even finish a street marathon in under 4 hours.
I used to be able to do that, but maybe I won't be able to do this now. But I don't know. Well, but the thing is, like when we're talking about street races, everything knows these kind of numbers and is talking about pace per kilometer. And after a while after some years of running, I really didn't like that anymore. And then social media makes it even worse. I mean, we had this really, really nice running group in Munich, Munich Urban Runners. I really loved that. I was one of the guides, and it was such a great group of people. But then it started that they would post their pace, and I did the trainings run today, and I did it in this and that pace, and it all became about competition. And this is something, I mean, the moment you start these trail races, people are so much more relaxed. I mean, obviously, there are many, many professional runners and they want to win a race, but even they are different than the professional runners doing road races, I think. Everything is so much more relaxed. And also, like you start talking to another runner when you're both just walking or hiking for, because it's very steep, and you would never do this on a, I don't know, in a really serious marathon. I don't know. So the whole atmosphere is so different, and nobody talks about how fast you were, and you also don't have to apologize for being slow. I mean, if I tell people, oh, I did this 50K trail race, and I don't know, it took me 8 hours, everybody's like, wow, you're able to be out there for 8 hours. So everything is valued a bit different.
It is true, right? Because in road running, we have an expectation. I mean, you even said, right? You couldn't do a mountain marathon in 4 hours, but we have this cultural understanding that a road marathon should be done in 4 hours, right? We have this number in our head, even though I've never run a road marathon, and I'm aware of that number. Where on trails, perhaps the top runners in trying to run Western States in under 14 hours, right? There are certain numbers we might know, but overall, it is really about a personal journey. And then in the mountains, so much is also weather dependent, and there's so many other factors of why how it is even harder. I mean, if you just compare UTMB, there've been so many course changes too, that it's even hard to compare the best times from one year to another, right?
Yeah, and then as you said, the conditions could be so different. Like one year it's very, very humid and hot, and the next year they have snow somewhere on the mountain. So the conditions are so different. So, and this is so exciting about trail running. You never really know what you get, right? I mean, I have no idea how this 50-miler tomorrow night is going to be. I have no idea. I don't even know the course. I mean, that's the thing. I just heard that, okay, it's some 50-ish. This is very dangerous. If the organizer says 50-ish, it's probably 55 miles or so. And he said it's about 6,000 feet of climbing. That is all I know. And but I mean, I have no idea about anything else. And this is the exciting thing, isn't it? I really like this. And this makes even this kind of race. I mean, this is just some 45 minutes away from where I'm living now. It's not that I'm not going to travel there. But still, it's so exciting because I have no idea what I'm going to get there tomorrow night.
Yeah, no, for sure. So what's interesting, and I would like to hear your thoughts a little bit. So you, on one side, a run with 17 people in Mozambique for several days, and you run a race 45 minutes from where you're from, and you don't even know much about the race. But then you also run UTMB. You run some of the biggest spectacles in our sport. Compare the motivation and the experience. What does that make it? How's that different? How do you feel about these differences?
This is really hard to say. When I did the CCC at UTMB last year, so this is the 100K, not the 100 miles one. Um, and I found it really, really exciting because I mean, like every European trail runner has this UTMB in his or her head, right? It's really a thing. And then I got a bib to write about it, so it was a press thing. So I didn't even have had to struggle to get the bib. I have to admit that. But then when I got it, I was like, oh my god, I'm in this race. I'm going to do the UTMB, and I had so many things in my head, and this makes it totally different to like a race like the one I'm doing tomorrow night. I mean, I'm so excited about this one as well. But the UTMB was just, I mean, everybody dreams about being in Chamonix and doing this race. And then the days before the race were so exciting, and there were so many runners. And so it is different. But then at the same time, while I was doing it and while I was experiencing all this kind of, I don't want to sound negative about it, but I call it circus now. I mean, this kind of, I mean, thousands of runners, and in a way, I mean, this is very special, but I have to compare it I think I still prefer standing there with 15 other runners somewhere in the desert and having this kind of personal thing. Do you know what I mean? I mean, it's um, in a way it feels more special because you have the impression that okay, not everybody is doing this. This is something really really special. But then again, at the same time, I was so excited about being at the UTMB, and this also made me finish the race because I felt really really bad after 50 kilometers. I couldn't. I had started eating too late, so I had some really serious stomach problems, and I felt so weak and so bad. And then my husband was waiting for me at this checkpoint, and it was like, oh my god, I could just go into the car now and would be in bed in about 1 hour. And I was really struggling to go on. And then it was like, no, wait a moment. This is the UTMB. You're at the UTMB. You're probably going to do this race once in your whole life. And you get the fuck out of here now and finish this race. And that's what I did. So, I mean, this kind of feeling that what you're doing here is really, really special also helps persuading yourself to go out there again and finish it, even if you're not feeling well.
Yeah. When you mentioned a circus and spectacle, I feel like, is it comparable? I'm making a very München comparison now. Is that I think every person who lives in München. I'm from Stuttgart and I lived in Munich for a year, and every person in Munich has to experience Oktoberfest once in their life. It is something special, but it's also a crazy carnival, and realistically, there are dozens of beer gardens all over the city, which have a much better atmosphere where you can, in a much more relaxed way, drink your beer and sit under trees with your friends and enjoy an evening. But at the same time, Oktoberfest deserves its special place, right?
Of course it does. And I've been there, but not very often, I had to say. And sometimes I just try to leave the city.
I understand that too.
Really, really, really drunk people that are in my S-Bahn then, and I can hardly come to work without stumbling over drunken people. So yeah, and there are these much smaller beer gardens that are so nice, and the atmosphere is really, really nice, and I love going there. By the way, which is maybe a really funny anecdote when talking about the Oktoberfest, I always went there like in normal clothes because I didn't have what's the English word for dirndl?
Well, the traditional Bavarian clothing.
Yeah, the traditional Bavarian clothes. And do you know when I bought this traditional Bavarian clothes, that was for the New York Marathon because I was invited to this parade of nations the evening before, and they asked us to come in some kind of traditional clothing. And so for this occasion, I bought this Bavarian traditional clothing. So even that was connected with running for me.
That's amazing. It's funny. We are on a big digression now, but I feel like that Bavarians, local Munich people wearing their traditional clothing to Oktoberfest is somewhat of a recent thing. Like, I feel like when I was younger, that didn't happen. I think sort of bringing the traditional side into Oktoberfest, that's something that only in the last 20 years or so has come up.
And very, very often it's not even traditional and Bavarian people, but it's true tourists buying some very cheap, not really traditional clothes and pretending to be traditional Bavarians. This is a recent development as well.
very, very true. And it also has nothing to do with this podcast. Well, let me ask you about these press invitations. Do you feel the pressure when you get an invite to run and to finish? Does it change how you approach a race and how much you can enjoy a race?
No, it doesn't change it at all because most of the times I'm not invited, and I always write about it in my running blog afterwards. So it's funny. One of my articles that got most reactions and many positive reactions was the one about my DNF at the Transalpine Run. That's really interesting. I felt so bad when writing this article. I felt like this loser who is not able to do this, and I wasn't able to finish it. And so I wrote this article about how I prepared for it and how I was so excited about it and how I failed and what kind of thoughts I had about it. And so this was an article. I got so many reactions to this article. People would write to me and tell me that they were, in a way, very happy to read about this because it happened to them as well. And so, well, that's no answer to your question, but that was really one of my, in a way, most successful articles, was about my least successful race. So no, I don't feel pressure. I always want to finish a race, and this is not really connected to the question whether I got an invitation or not. I really always want to finish a race.
Yeah.
So no, there's no pressure because I was invited.
Yeah. No, it is interesting, and it's good to hear that you can separate that, right? That you don't feel like you are now somewhat in an official capacity, or you need to represent the race in a positive light, even if you didn't have a good time or whatever, right?
No, and this is something I would never do. I would never do this. And also in my article, I wrote several articles about the UTMB, and I also wrote about the difficulties I was facing and how I really didn't feel well. And I think this is really part of the story. And I mean, I'm neither a professional sports journalist nor a professional runner. So what I can write about is how I approached these races and what I was feeling and what I felt special about. And so I would never pretend that I have had a wonderful race and everything was great when it wasn't.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think luckily in our sport, we don't, there are not too many companies who have too many dollars riding on the consistent well-being of their athletes, that athletes in general can still be fairly honest about them, about their experiences, right? Mm-hmm. I mean,
that's true.
I think once the stock market gets involved, once there are millions of dollars riding on your team doing well, then I think there is sort of a different way of how the media perceives your comments. But I think ultras are something where we as humans put ourselves in such a extreme situation that we would be lying if we would be saying that everything is always perfect. It is about problem solving, right?
Exactly. I mean, there are also so many really, really wonderful moments out there. This is also part of the story, right? That in an ultra, your mood can change so quickly. And I'm not lying if I'm saying that I had some of the most intense and really nicest, wonderful moments during an ultra race as well. So it's both. It's both.
Mm-hmm. No, very true. You go and speak about running in the German-speaking Europe. When you are invited to speak, what are your topics? What do you talk about? Who comes and hears your story?
It didn't happen that often that I was invited to speak about it. It was I don't know, maybe 10 times during the last 4 or 5 years. And after my book has been published, I often read about the book, from the book a bit, and then just showed pictures and talked about, how we started this conversation about why I think running is so important for me in my life and what this could have to do with other people out there as well, and why it's not always about winning a race, but about the experiences and about adventures. And so it's a bit of race experiences, adventures, but also some sort of motivational stuff as well. I mean, at the end of it, I want to get people to go out there as well and to understand that it's okay to be slow and to not go out there to run a marathon tomorrow, but to go out there and try like a 5K race or whatever, or just go for a walk. Or, I mean, that is something I try to tell people, that if you have a dream, you should really try try it. And as I said, I never, when I'm at the starting line, I never know whether I'm going to finish, I don't know. As we said, you never know what's going to happen. But if you don't try it, you'll never find out. And this is something I want to tell people when I talk about my races and the running adventures. And then it happens quite often that when they after I talked about it and people would pose a question, they start by apologizing for, well, I can't run as long as you. And I'm always like, oh my God, no, you don't have to do that. Do you like running? Do you like being out there, outside? Do you like going to the mountains? Wow, that's great. So that's what it's all about.
It is, and it's important to not forget that if you want to motivate people, you need to connect with ordinary people and not just look up at these professional machines that have bad luck that they were born and raised in the mountains, and they're sort of, I mean, they're inspiring too, but their stories and are so removed from everyday people that it's more important to sort of bring our experience to everyday people. That's what's truly motivating, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And to really tell them that, hey, I'm also really slow and I never win a race, and that's fine.
Yeah. It really is about the personal journey.
Yeah, exactly.
Andrea, thank you so much for this incredible conversation. Before I let you go, tell listeners where they can find you online, where they can reach out to you, where they should follow you.
Oh, yeah, I'm happy to do that. I have a running blog, which is www.runninghappy.de, because it's based in Germany. And it is, unfortunately, for all the people in the US listening now, it is in German. But well, Google Translate will help. Sometimes I'm member of the Essex Frontrunner team, and we have a blog as well. And sometimes on the essex.com page, I write some English articles, but not that often. And then I'm also on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook, and it's always on Twitter, I'm with my name, so it's Andrea Löw. And on Instagram, it's Running Happy. So I'd be happy. And on my running blog, there's also an email if anybody wants to connect. I'd be happy to answer questions or just be in touch, or I don't know, meet people at one of these races while I'm here.
Perfect. Exactly. I will have all of these links in the show notes for when the episode is going to get published. Andrea, thank you again for coming on the show. I hope you're getting a good rest before your 50-mile night run that you just spontaneously signed up.
Yeah, thank you so much, and thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely.
That was great.